and we're pleased you're with us for episode number 79. That's 79 consecutive months. Governor John Bel Edwards has been with us, and there's an opportunity once a month to ask anything on your mind, so please give us a call if you're so inclined. 877-217-5757 is your Ask the Governor number. And the governor's in the house since we last left him in September. He's had a busy month. As we parted company last month, it was on the brink of Hurricane Ida, which did not come to Louisiana, but certainly made its impression known in Florida and in other parts of the country. And, Governor, I know you're grateful that we dodged a bullet, and also the state has been providing help to those who were affected dramatically in Florida.
Absolutely. It was Hurricane Ian.
That's right. Ida was. I'm a year behind.
No, but those three-letter names, both starting with I and having an A in them. No, I was able to contact Governor DeSantis of Florida and make sure that he knew we were leaning forward to provide whatever assistance he might need, primarily through the National Guard. But I wanted him to know that if we satisfied his request for assistance, he doesn't just get the number of soldiers and the equipment. He gets really experienced people because of the number of hurricanes we've had over the last few years, and not just with the National Guard, because we've had folks from DCF help with sheltering. We've had GOSEP help with housing and communications. We've had Fire Marshal's Office personnel help. But most of the assistance that we provided did involve the National Guard, truck companies, for example, UH-60 helicopters and so forth. And they all performed very well. And today I got a very nice note from Senator Marco Rubio, who thanked the state of Louisiana for the very generous support that we were able to provide. I was telling you before we came on the air, as it turns out, this has been our best storm season, I think, since 1991. And I'm very thankful for that, coming as it does right after several very active years. But I still feel terrible for the people of Florida, because I know that they're going to be recovering for a very long time, and we'll continue to be engaged and provide whatever assistance we can.
Again, 877-217-5757. We'll go to the phone lines in short order. The governor, since we last talked, also made a trip abroad. How did that one go?
It was a great trip. We actually left the day, I think it was, that Ian came ashore in Florida. And as it happened, the very next day, we were at Lloyd's of London speaking to them for about 3 hours, talking about our insurance market in Louisiana and how challenging that is. And it was only made more challenging by that hurricane, because many of the the insurers who operate in Louisiana also operate in Florida. And so those claims we know are going to be rolling in and are going to have a big impact on us here in Louisiana as well. But also, every time you have a major storm that is that destructive, it's taken into consideration in the modeling. And one of the things that we learned is that a couple of years ago, reinsurance rates are based on the model, what they predict in terms of the severity and frequency of storms and the resulting damage and the claims that can be expected. And the model's proved off by 100%. And that is a startling figure for me. What that meant was, overnight, reinsurance rates went up 100% on insurance companies. And that caused some companies to not buy as much reinsurance as they wanted. Or if they did, they had to raise their premium so much on their policyholders, business owners and homeowners, that it really increased the premiums, in one fell swoop by an extraordinary degree. All of that is very destabilizing. So we had 3-hour conversation with them about things that we can do here in Louisiana. And of course, we were joined by the Committee of 100 and folks from economic development there as well. But we had meetings with Shell, and they're one of the biggest investors right now in the Gulf South, but it really is in Louisiana in terms of biofuels and low carbon energy going forward. We had meetings with other folks there, including Drax and Cheniere Energy. By the way, Cheniere, the biggest LNG producer in the country, and of course its biggest operations are here in Louisiana. And we're in Europe talking about natural gas, incredibly important right now that they get all the natural gas that they can because it's not coming out of Russia the way it was. And that has been very destabilizing to them. And we had some other meetings that went extremely well, and most of it around the energy transition and cleaner energy with a lower carbon footprint and all of the investment opportunities that we have here in Louisiana. So it was a great trip.
A couple of big announcements today involving development in towns of Louisiana that are historic. Vidalia, St. Gabriel, what's going on in those places?
Well, I'll tell you, $220 million coming from the U.S. Department of Energy for Sierra Technologies. This is a new facility in Vidalia. It's going to expand their production of active anode material derived from graphite. And this is a key component to lithium batteries. But that's $220 million, 221 jobs. And when you think about Vidalia, Louisiana, 221 jobs, that is a major announcement. That's a major announcement anywhere in the state or in the country. And then on top of that, Cora down in St. Gabriel, $100 million from the U.S. Department of Energy. And this is for another component for lithium batteries that will be manufactured there. And there'll be 80 new jobs there. And that, too, is very important. They will produce enough of this lithium. It's actually lithium hexafluoride phosphate to provide the material so that 1 million electric vehicles per year can be manufactured. So that's happening here in Louisiana. I spoke with Secretary Granholm yesterday and thanked her for that announcement.
79 shows strong, and the governor of Louisiana is one of the few governors, if any, to do a show of this kind, and certainly of this duration. We're now closing in on the end of year 7 of conducting this program for the people of Louisiana, and the governor's the one who pulled the trigger, and we're grateful for that. And Jerry Mayer of Hometown Productions, now in its 28th year, is in the studio, as he always is, either he or a representative of his company. They are taping the show for broadcast throughout the state on cable television systems. So thank you very much, and we'll go to the phone lines. Let's start with Kelly in St. Francisville. Kelly, you're on Ask the Governor.
Yes, Governor, I want to know, recently National Congress passed the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. How do you assess the effect for the people of Louisiana of those two major pieces of legislation?
Well, Kelly, thank you very much for the call. Generally speaking, both of them are very good for our state. In fact, we talked about the two announcements that we're making today, $320 million worth, $220 million in Vidalia, $100 million in St. Gabriel, and these are for manufacturing facilities that together are going to produce well over 300 jobs, but produce critical components for electric vehicle batteries. Well, that funding was made available because of the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. And that's just one little piece of it. We announced last week $270 million on the next 5 years out of a bridge program where we're going to receive a total of $1 billion. But the $270 million is going to be going to local bridges that are not part of the state system. And then you have the broadband funding. So we will get funding from the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act at the end of the day that should be a little over $1 billion to go with the $177 million we've already gotten. So just over and over, an extra $1 billion over 5 years just for the standard road and bridge program that we get for the state of Louisiana. And then you start talking about closing in wells and so forth. And then with respect to the Inflation Reduction Act, we have a lot of companies that are expressing serious interest in additional manufacturing investments in our state to do some things that, quite frankly, are important because we've seen what supply chain disruptions can do when critical things are manufactured elsewhere. And a lot of manufacturers, because of that act, are looking to come back to Louisiana or to the United States and invest in Louisiana manufacturing. So I always talk about the the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, and I thank Senator Cassidy, who voted for it. but also Representative Troy Carter. And then, it's just these things are going to be very, very good for our state, and for many reasons that I can't get into. Just don't have enough time.
You mentioned the two voted for it. All the others voted against it. Is that a disappointment?
Well, it wouldn't be. It would be a disappointment if it failed by a couple of votes, but it actually passed, and it's doing great things for our state, and so I'm just thankful. And I'm not sure. You would have to ask the members why they voted against it. Quite often we let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and when it comes to infrastructure, we need investment. And if you wait for the perfect vehicle, it'll never come. And so I'm glad that they passed this one. It's going to be really good for our state. It already is good. It's already starting to make a difference here.
877-217-5757 for Governor John Bell Edwards. Let's go to Charles in Mandeville. Hi, Charles. You're on with the governor.
Hey, Governor, I appreciate you guys taking my call. Governor, the president decided in the last couple of weeks to pardon and expunge the records of federally convicted simple marijuana possession citizens, and I was wondering whether or not you were going to follow that lead, because I think he requested that the governors do the same, and if not, what would be the reason for not doing so? Thank you so much.
Charles, thank you very much for the call. First of all, I would certainly be inclined to follow the president's lead, and this is why. You now have many states across the country where simple possession, use of marijuana is actually legal. And in other states, such as ours, it's still not legal, but we handle it much like a speeding ticket where you're given a citation. So sometimes that's referred to as decriminalization. Technically, that's wrong because it continues to be a crime, but obviously not one that is significant in terms of our criminal justice statutes. So I would be inclined to do it. I don't think people who have been convicted of simple possession of marijuana ought to face barriers to employment or to housing or to education or to any other things. But the challenge here in Louisiana is that my authority to pardon criminal offenses comes from the Constitution, and it is limited to those individuals who actually are eligible to apply for a pardon, and then the pardon board votes to recommend clemency. Then it comes to my desk. So I don't, quite frankly, have the legal ability to issue a blanket pardon for individuals who don't go through that process. And we are in discussions now with some leaders in the legislature to see if there's an appetite and a way forward so that we can do something similar in Louisiana to what the president did. I would absolutely be inclined to do it. I can't based on the limitations that I have with respect to granting clemency.
Thank you, Charles. Andrea in New Orleans, I believe. Andrea, you're on the air with the governor. Hi, Andrea.
Thanks. Hi, Governor Edwards. Thanks so much. You talked about economics, and it seems to me there's two reasons that people and families leave our great state. One is the economics, and you're working very hard on that. Thank you. Making jobs is important. The other thing is feeling safe, and I wonder why you've raised your hands and walked away from defending transgender children and marriage and women who are facing extreme health, family risks in either needing an abortion or having gender-different kids.
Andrea, thank you for the call. And as you cited, we're doing everything we can to diversify our economy, secure investment, create jobs. And we actually are enjoying the lowest unemployment ever measured here in Louisiana as we speak. The new numbers come out Friday, so our fingers are crossed. The challenge there is the Fed's saying that until unemployment goes up, we're not going to get inflation under control. And so they're actually working against high employment levels. With respect to your second point, I would reject the premise that I've thrown my hands up at all. it was very clear to me this year, and for reasons that I stated at the time, quite simply, the one transgender bill that we had, and I'm assuming this is the one that you're referring to, changes were made from last year. It got additional votes in the legislature, and an additional veto this year just would not have been sustained. And the bill was a little bit more limited than it had been in the past. And they're just after conversations with a number of folks in the legislature, I knew that vetoing that bill would have been pointless, and therefore I didn't sign it either. I don't think the bill's necessary because it seeks to prescribe conduct that isn't happening and has never happened in our state. But I don't know how that would be characterized as throwing my hands up or however you mentioned that. Then with respect to abortion, as you know, Andrew, I assume you know, I've always been pro-life, and that's been my position from the very beginning. As I've said before, I do believe that there ought to be exceptions, not just for the life and serious health consequences to the mother, but also for rape and incest. And we're going to continue to work with the legislature to have those added. I hope that can be done this year. This will be the first legislative session to be conducted after the Supreme Court's decision was rendered that overturned Roe versus Wade. And so hopefully we'll be able to have a good discussion in that regard. I quite simply just don't believe that, for example, that a 13-year-old ought to be forced to carry to term a pregnancy that was caused by her stepfather or something like that. And unfortunately, those cases do happen. They're not that frequent, thank goodness, but they do happen. They're real. So those are my positions on those issues, and none of them are new. And if you're disappointed, I hate that. But at the end of the day, that I've been very consistent.
Thank you, Andrea. James in Longview, Texas. Hello, James.
Well, good afternoon, Jim, and good afternoon, Governor Edwards. Anyhow, I just had a question that you earlier alluded to, your meeting with executives from Lloyd's of London regarding insurance and reinsurance for businesses and homeowners. Could you explain a little bit more about the reinsurance part? Is that where they've had multiple claims, and do they kind of try to offset risk by having more insurance agents?
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you, James, for calling in again today. You've been a very faithful listener and caller. So the meeting with Lloyd's of London was very helpful because they've been around for about 600 years in the insurance business. It is a group of underwriting syndicates, and they probably know more about insurance than anybody else. And I was surprised to find out that Louisiana is the number 6 state in the nation for insurance involving Lloyd's of London, and a lot of that has to do with marine property that is insured. But there were a number of things that we discussed, and one of them was the area of reinsurance. A lot of people don't understand what that is, but insurance companies themselves insure part of the risk that they incur when they issue a policy by buying insurance, and that's called reinsurance. And obviously, if the cost of reinsurance goes up, then some insurance companies won't buy as much as they need to fully protect themselves, and if they do, then they're going to pay a lot more, and then that gets passed on to the insureds, whether they're homeowners or business owners, in premiums. And the key thing that I learned, and by the way, I think this is a validation of the fact that we have a climate action plan and net zero carbon dioxide emission goals by 2050. It's climate change driven. And the models that predict the frequency and severity of storms and the claims that can be expected have proven over the last few years to be off by 100%. And so if you then adjust the rates in order to accommodate that change, and then you have to go up on the reinsurance by 100%. Well, that's simply not affordable for some insurance companies, but it's not affordable to homeowners and business owners either. So we talked about a number of other things as well, and what we can do from a statutory regulatory standpoint to make the state more attractive to the industry, so that we can have more competition here and not less, and drive the premiums down, or at least hold them steady in a way that we haven't been able to do in the past. And of course, I think we've had 9 insurance companies go belly up. That is not good for us. That reduces competition. We have too many people with policies issued by Citizens. It's supposed to be an insurer of last resort, and it's not good because it has too many policies issued, but they cost too much.
This is Jim Inkster. Thank you for being with us for Ask the Governor, and your number is 877-217-5757. We're going to go to as many of you as possible, so please make your remarks as brief as possible. We start with Will in New Orleans. Hi, Will.
Thanks, and hello, Governor Edwards. I'm calling, just like the last caller, to ask a question about insurance. I'm curious if the state can do anything about the reinsurance market to help bring down costs for programs like Louisiana Citizens. We're seeing our policy go from $8,000 this year, it was the only option we had, likely to $13,000 next year with the increases. Thank you.
Yeah, well, there's always some things we can do. It is very difficult in the marketplace in the Gulf Coast of the United States right now because insurance companies estimate their risk based on the frequency and severity of storms and the claims that result from that. Now, one of the things we can do is we can fight against climate change, and we're the only Gulf South state to have a climate action plan to get us to net zero by 2050, and so I think that that's really important. But directly, we can do some things that will bring more insurance companies in the market and keep more insurance companies. But it is not something that happens overnight. You've got to change your regulatory and statutory scheme in place in ways that make sense. And quite frankly, some of that would be controversial because I've said it on this show before and elsewhere, and I believe it. Insurance companies have not acquitted themselves very well. And so many of the things that they would want us to do to make our market more attractive, kind of fly in the face of their performance overall. But at the end of the day, through incentive programs, for example, and we did this after Katrina with some success, we can get companies who are here to take a larger market share. We can bring companies in. But it is not a good thing when more and more homeowners such as yourself are with Louisiana Citizens, because it's supposed to be an insurer of last resort, and it's got to be priced at least 10% higher than other policies that may be available to make sure it's an insurance company, insurer of last resort. But we have way too many policies that are being issued there, and obviously we need to get more companies in Louisiana who will take over much of that business. But it is difficult, and it isn't a problem just here in Louisiana. It's a problem all across the Gulf South. And as I understand it, the issue in Florida was worse than here, and that was even before the most recent hurricane. So we've got a lot of work to do. There's no doubt about that.
Caitlin in New Orleans. Hello, Caitlin. You're on the air, Caitlin.
Hello. Hi.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, my question has to do with a report that recently came out that said that Louisiana has the 4th highest rate of polluted waterways, and in particular along the very part that's known as Cancer Alley. And so I was just wondering what will be done to force the industries to clean up their act and how they manufacture and clean up what they already have polluted. And then second part is, are you able to help with the situation of Gordon Plaza here in New Orleans, which is the 2nd highest rate of cancer in the state, with the people living on the toxic landfill?
Caitlin, I am not able to say that I've seen the report that you're referring to, and I think you said something about. And by the way, thank you for the call. The fourth highest rate of polluted water in the country. I haven't seen the report. I can't comment on that. What I can tell you is that the state of Louisiana, working with the EPA, we enforce all the actionable standards with respect to emissions, whether they be ground, air, or water. And we issue fines where necessary. We enter into a litigation where necessary, consent judgments, and so forth, in order to get the companies who operate here back into compliance with whatever their permit and the actionable standards happen to be. And that will obviously continue, but I can't speak to that particular report. And then I didn't fully understand. You said something about in New Orleans there's a landfill. Did you hear?
I'm not sure where she was going with that, Governor.
Yeah, and so I'm not able to respond to that either. I know that there is some litigation that has actually produced a judgment. It's not yet final with respect to the housing corporation. I think it was in New Orleans that built the housing complex for low-income individuals over a landfill. That may be what you were talking about, but the state is not a party to that. The money came directly from HUD to the New Orleans Housing Corporation. Houses were built. I think the city council did come up with some funding for that in terms of relocating individuals who may have lived there, but I just know what I read in the paper. So on that one, but if that's what you're talking about, but Caitlin, I'm sorry, I can't be more specific.
Harry in St. Martinville. Harry, good afternoon. You're on with the governor.
Good afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon, Harry. Thank you for calling.
Good afternoon, Jim.
Hi, Harry.
Governor, I want to know, why is it necessary to have amendment number 7 in spite of the fact that we have the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution? What is your position on that? What do you think about that?
Well, Amendment number 7, I was looking at the Morning Advocate. I shouldn't say the Morning Advocate anymore. The Advocate the other day. Representative Edmund Jordan, who comes from West Baton Rouge Parish, indicated that, and that was his resolution that was offered to the legislature and adopted by the House and the Senate to put this amendment up for the consideration for the voters of Louisiana. I don't think he continues to support the amendment either. And it's not just the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, but there's already a state constitutional ban on slavery and involuntary servitude as well, but it allows involuntary servitude as a punishment for crime. And the language was going to change that and say it would be a ban on slavery and involuntary servitude, allowing the use only for the lawful administration of criminal justice. So I don't know that there's any real change to happen should the amendment be adopted. It's one of those things, and the legislature by at least a 2/3 vote has to vote in support of putting an amendment to the state constitution in front of voters. It is not something that is subject to a veto, however, as it is, but in any event, I don't see how it would make any real difference. I think Representative Jordan himself is no longer in support of the amendment, and I hope that answers your question somewhat, Harriet.
All right. Thank you, Harry. Zach in Covington. Hello, Zach.
Hello. Thanks for taking my call. Governor, this is in regard to the Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion. Your Coastal Protection and Reparation Authority has said that they will be able to build some 30 square miles of freshwater marsh with the diversion. But the Corps of Engineers environmental impact study indicates that oysters will probably not be able to live in Barataria Basin after the fresh water starts coming in there. And I was just asking, would would you consider asking CPRA to develop a project that created as much or more land in the coastal zone without harming the oyster industry, or actually with the opportunity of enhancing and expanding the oyster industry? Thank you.
Well, Zach, thank you. And by the way, I come from Amite, where we have the Oyster Festival. We're down to one oyster house, but when I was a kid, we used to have 5. I love them. They're a big part of our state. And so I have instructed Chairman Klein and the folks at the CPRA to make sure we mitigate against whatever adverse consequences there are to not just oystermen, but whether it's shrimpers or fishermen or whoever. That is being studied. And I will tell you that overall, the environmental impact statement issued by the Corps of Engineers is very positive for the sediment diversion. Quite simply put, we have to create more coastal marsh as a storm surge barrier if we're going to protect the populated parts of Louisiana who live in close proximity to the coast, not just homeowners, but business owners and visitors and everywhere else. And reconnecting the sediment that comes from the river that used to naturally at springtime, flow out into the marsh is a way to do that. But we're going to move forward with the diversions. We want the sediment out there creating marsh. We will mitigate against adverse impacts.
This is Jim Inkster. Thank you for joining us for show 79 of Ask the Governor. Governor of Louisiana, John Bel Edwards, has been doing this for 7 years now, and we're heading the home stretch of 2022, and we're heading into 2023. A few items before we go back to the callers. It's hard to believe. It seems like the other day that Governor Edwards in 2015 defeated David Vitter, and then in 2019 defeated Eddie Risponi. Well, the next governor's election is October 14th, 2023. We're inside a year now. We don't know who's running yet. What do you think?
Well, I think that we need to wait till early next year, get past these midterm elections, and I think some additional polling after that, and you're going to have some folks who may have indicated an interest who will decide and announce that they're not running, and some people whose names you haven't even heard yet, I believe, will announce that they are running. That's very different than the way I did it, as you recall, because I knew that I didn't have a lot of name recognition, certainly didn't have individual wealth that I could rely upon, and didn't, just needed to get out there and work longer. But I think by the end of this year, early next year, you're going to have some names that will be in consideration.
Yours was almost a 3-year campaign. Do you think a Democratic office holder, not just a person with a D beside his or her name, a Democratic office holder will run?
I hope so. Obviously, that would be my preference, not just to run, but to win. But I can't give you a name today. I'm in discussions with several, but I think it's good for the people of Louisiana to have a number of choices, so that they can choose from a number of well-qualified candidates who are obviously going to hold different views and have different philosophies that they would bring to the job. But I think that that's good for democracy and good for the state of Louisiana, and so I would hope that that's going to be the case next year.
And lastly, on elections, we have an open primary in Louisiana. We have now almost for 50 years. And I would think if a Republican is elected governor, there will be a move to change that. Do you like the system as it's currently configured?
Well, it's hard for me to argue against a system that I was successful in navigating. So I do like it. And by the way, I think if you look across the country, you are seeing more states, not in wholesale fashion, but on occasion, another state will go to that open primary system, and I think it serves us well in Louisiana. I happen to think that you get more mainstream candidates and less extreme candidates when you do it this way, because if you have party primaries, you sort of know who votes in primary elections. And you typically end up, by the way, we see this playing out all over the country right now. Democrats and Republicans. You have, you have the most extreme candidates in many, many cases who are actually getting into the general election. And most of the voters in these states would much rather have somebody closer to the center of the spectrum to vote for, but it isn't possible. Well, it is possible in Louisiana, and I will tell you that's how I won twice. So I am not going to argue against this system that I think produces good results and allows the voters of Louisiana to have a bigger choice.
Well, you and a federal judge were convinced that Louisiana was violating voting rights laws by having the congressional districts configured as they are, but the elections are going on as the legislature willed them to do so, and it looks like it's going to be largely a yawner on November 8th in our state, and that's only, 20 days away.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Well, I was just going to remind people that even though the election is 20 days away, they need to look at their early voting opportunities because that's how an awful lot of people vote now. It's just more convenient, and you're going to have a Saturday and then all of a week and then another Saturday to do that. But you're right. The election is November the 8th, and there's all sorts of elections out there. We have a U.S. Senate election, every congressional member. We have a special election, a couple of them in the state legislature, two in the Senate, in fact. So I encourage people to take advantage of the early voting opportunities they have. That's the most convenient way that many people find to vote because you never know what the weather's going to be like on the actual election day or how you're going to feel and so forth.
And it is a Tuesday election, and we're not accustomed to voting on Tuesdays.
Right, and we don't normally vote on Tuesday, and people still have to go to work.
Right.
And so you have to make time to vote before or after work, and some people actually work late in the day. It's just, but when you have 7 full days of early voting, there really is not an excuse not to vote. That's kind of what my mother tells me about going to Mass, too, you know. There are all sorts of Mass times starting Saturday at 4 all the way through Sunday night at about 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock if you go to LSU.
That's right. So there's no excuse.
Yeah. Now, you're still registered in Tangipahoa Parish, right?
Yes,
right.
I am.
So I would suspect that Steve Scalise is your congressman.
No, actually, it is Julia Letlow.
Really?
Yeah.
Representing Tangipahoa,
yeah. Her district runs from Shudrint to Bogalusa. It is actually larger. It is less compact than the majority black district that could and should have been drawn for the 5th Congressional District, which is why the Alabama case is going to be instructive but not determinative of the challenge here in Louisiana because the most compact district, the one that satisfied the redistricting principles the most, was the one that created a second majority black district, not the district that we have.
Okay, student loan forgiveness. That's a hot topic right now, and Louisiana residents are certainly eligible. We do have a TOPS program, but we have a lot of student debt, and nationally, student loan debt actually exceeds credit card debt. What do you think, Governor?
Well, it almost doesn't matter what I think. This program exists. I think that people ought to be aware of it, and if they choose to, they should take advantage. These are the numbers we've been given from the White House and the U.S. Department of Education. There are about 600,000 Louisianans who, under this program, are eligible for some relief. We think about 2/3 of those, about 400,000, are eligible for the full $20,000 in loan forgiveness. The president announced earlier this week that the program is operational, that the application can be made now in less than 5 minutes from a mobile device, desktop, and so forth. But you got to go to www.studentaid.gov. And so I encourage people, if you've got student debt, see whether you are eligible and take advantage of the program. We do know that quite often people come out of college and they have student debt payments that rival a mortgage payment. And if this is a way that they can get some help in these times when we have high inflation and pressures being put on everyone's pocketbook, I think they should take advantage of it. So I put that information out there again. It's studentaid.gov, and would encourage people to see if they're eligible.
Cindy in Baton Rouge. Hello, Cindy. You're on with Governor Edwards.
Hello, Governor Edwards. This is such a pleasure to talk to you. I know you'll be able to answer this question pretty quickly.
I hope so,
My
Cindy.
question, I know you will. I know you support this. The Windfall Elimination Provision Act and the GPO bill, as you know, has gone in for repeal, but now we are now at a juncture where it's going to be a discharge petition in November, and hopeful that they will vote on it this year.
Yeah, well, Cindy, I would very much like for the windfall elimination to go away, and so the listening audience can have a better idea of what we're talking about. Many decades ago, the state of Louisiana decided for public sector employees not to pay into the Social Security system. And so when someone works for the state of Louisiana, or potentially they're a teacher, they are not getting the quarters of Social Security paid into the way you do in the private sector. And this has really created an issue for state employees once they retire, including my mother. The provision you're talking about in a bill has been filed in every Congress going back for many years now. It's never been successful, and I'm told it's because there's quite a cost associated with it. But I do think it would restore fairness if there's a way to do it. I think that's why the bills get filed in Congress every year. But I do want to point this out because I literally get questioned about this several times a month. It is not anything the state can do at this point. It is a federal matter, and Congress is going to have to act if the windfall elimination provision is to go away and allow for state employees to participate in the Social Security system.
We have less than a minute to go, but let's slide in Amanda in Lafayette. Please be brief, Amanda.
Hi, I'm growing increasingly concerned that secular liberties are being ignored by our local and state governments, such as arresting people for exercising free speech, trying to ban books and fire librarians.
All right. There has been an issue in Lafayette in particular regarding that, Governor.
Yeah. First of all, throughout history, we've had lots of instances where books were being banned. None of them prove to be meritorious. I don't favor that approach. I don't. If you don't want to read something, don't read it. And if you don't want your children checking it out, what we find out is quite often these books are not in a section of the library that the children are accessing anyway. So I don't know about all the specific instances that you just mentioned, but obviously I'm not in favor of banning books, and I think our libraries should be functioning as libraries and let the librarians and the boards control that. I want to thank you and say, go Tigers, beat Ole Miss.
That's Saturday, Tiger Stadium. Until next time, thanks for listening and stay tuned.